A mysterious virus breaks out in the world, completely changing it. People are confined indoors, and they are forced to grieve using their mobiles and laptops since physical meetings are impossible. But things are quite different with the story's protagonist, since he is living with the most beautiful girl in his class as the academic classes have also become online. As the beauty pokes him playfully, he frantically wonders whether being mushy-mushy is unavoidable while they are living together. As the jabbing continues, the protagonist is forced to make weird noise. Even though he clasps his mouth to control himself, he manages to attract the attention of the teacher. His beautiful companion Hoshikawa apologizes for the disruption, explaining that it's her brother's doing, who wanted his reference book she had. Satisfied, the teacher decides to move ahead with the lesson. An abashed Hoshikawa whispers an apology to the protagonist, referring to him as Yoshino-kun, who is still recovering from embarrassment. Hoshikawa is known to be drop-dead gorgeous with silky hair, fair skin, and huge attractive eyes. Her well-shaped lips are usually covered with a mask. The breathtaking beauty's full name is Hoshikawa Haruka and presumably belongs to an elite family. She is known as a complete package with brains to match her ethereal looks. Due to her tremendous popularity, she is always surrounded by lovers, and Yoshino Kaneda always thinks that she is out of his league. That is the reason he is still skeptical that the most happening girl is sitting right next to him while in the state of confinement. However, he is quite perplexed about Hoshikawa's constant attempt to be cozy with him. For instance, when he notices that the laptop is not functioning properly, Hoshikawa instantly slides her head towards the laptop, brushing her cheeks with his face on purpose to find the problem. He nervously notices that she is smiling peevishly in her act. He wonders whether she is trying to get closer just to see his reaction and enjoy the whole situation. After a while, she announces that the problem is fixed. A distraught Yoshina slaps his forehead, as according to him, it is unethical to touch anyone offhandedly. He anxiously thinks that had he been a vulgar person, a beautiful girl like Hoshikawa wouldn't have been safe in his hands, so she should be grateful that he is a thorough gentleman. His cultured thoughts are rudely interrupted by a sharp poke, and to his alarm this time she poked him in his sensitive area. As he watches her in horror, she has this serene, cheesy smile on her face. As she flushes and coughs meaningfully, he speculates whether she is exposing herself on purpose. He tries to shrug off those sleazy thoughts since she can be ignorant and the whole thing is a big confusion. He decides to confirm his doubts on his own and hesitantly tugs at her skirt. Instantly he closes his eyes, terrified to see her reaction. It seems as if Hoshikawa is struck with a thunderbolt since she flushes furiously. He anxiously inquires whether she is okay, and the jittery tomato assures him of her well-being. He scratches his head in distress, thinking of brewing some warm tea later, which he cannot expect her to make since she is bad with machines. Currently, they are living in Hoshikawa's house where he arrived 3 days ago. 3 days back, a second-year high schooler Yoshino was baffled to see a big notice outside his dorm that stated that non-staff people were not allowed to enter. A staff member informed him that they found an infected person inside and the janitor had to disinfect the whole area. A perturbed Yoshino was informed that he would not be able to enter the dormitory for an infinite period since it would be closed from that day onwards. He yelled in distress about his belongings that were still trapped in his room. The staff member informed him that all the dorm members had been evacuated to their respective hometowns because a catastrophe would arise if the infection spread rapidly in multitudes. The staff member had regretfully forgotten to inform Yoshino since he was in the club room, messing around with the computer, completely unaware of the situation. He even called his mother, but she strongly prohibited him from coming home due to an infection risk. Even his friends turned their back on him for the same reason. Poor Yoshino was in a fix since he had nowhere to go. He headed towards an internet cafe, but the lady regretfully refused to provide him any refuge since high schoolers were not allowed after a 10 p.m. curfew. He even tried his luck in a restaurant and a karaoke bar, but was refused entry due to his school attire. He checked his wallet and had only 20,000 yen, so checking into a hotel was out of the question. The poor lad has no choice but to lie down on a park bench under the starry sky. He assures himself that he can survive like that since the weather is moderate. Out of the blue, he notices a shadow of someone walking toward him. To his astonishment, it is none other than his classmate, Hoshikawa Haruka. Since both have their faces covered with masks, only their eyes meet in utter bewilderment. Instantly, they look away, feeling the awkwardness of the situation. She even performs a foolish act of pulling out her phone from her purse and begins to swerve it here and there, placing it in an upward direction. He suspects her mental state after seeing her perform a snake dance in the middle of the deserted night. Quite boldly, she claims that she was trying to catch the Wi-Fi signals. He senses that she is looking in his direction while speaking monotonously. Their eyes meet again all of a sudden, and then, in the spur of a moment, they become aloof. He mumbles something incomprehensible behind his mask, and all her senses become alert as she turns toward him expectantly. Finally, he sits upright and apologizes to her for startling her. She animatedly corrects him, claiming she isn't shocked but just slightly surprised. Next, she pretends to act astounded to recognize Yoshino Kanata from her class and proclaims that she couldn't guess earlier due to the darkness and his half-hidden face behind the mask. He confirms her suspicion, and then a fake chuckle of familiarity follows from Hoshikawa. He is bewildered to see her so exhilarated and wonders whether she has a cheerful nature. Instantly, she realizes her goofiness and normalizes herself by inquiring stoically about his presence at such an hour. He doesn't know how to respond, so he blurts out that he feels like sleeping outside. He explains to a puzzled Hoshikawa that he lives in a dormitory. She cuts him off by claiming that she already knows since earlier she had seen him coming out of the dormitory. Yoshino's ears prick up as he registers that she has actually noticed him. He quickly mentions that he had to move out of the dormitory due to an infected case discovered in it, and now he has nowhere to go. She suggests going to his own family, but he explains that even they didn't take him due to infection risks. He questions her about her sudden presence at such a late hour. She stammers and then explains that she wants to get Wi-Fi signals on her phone. She informs him that without Wi-Fi, they won't be able to attend the upcoming online classes. She plans to fish for the signal and bring it home. Yoshino loudly interrupts her in the middle, to her bafflement, and points out that public Wi-Fi can only be used in the surrounding vicinity and not at her home. He advises her that she could easily set up a remote environment if she has an internet connection at home. He questions her about both the internet connection and Wi-Fi, and she expresses her ignorance about both options. He mocks her for outsmarting him, and she politely smiles and thanks him. He is certain that she is intelligent enough to understand everything independently. She hesitates and blurts out that she doesn't understand hardware at all. Next, she makes a pussycat face and reveals to him that she knows he is in the computer club. Her revelation takes him by surprise as he doesn't expect her to know a lot about him. She requests his help, her eyes subdued and her face behind the mask colors a little as she expresses her desire to learn about computers from the well-informed Yoshino-kun. He sits in a daze, trying to convince himself that he isn't dreaming. He can't believe his eyes or ears that a day would come when the most beautiful girl in his class would beg him for help. Hoshikawa's face lights up upon hearing his affirmation, and he decides it is better to help her than to lie alone at night. Immediately, she reminds him about the Wi-Fi and requests him to activate it at her house, which is a 5-minute walk away. Yoshino expresses concern about her parents' reactions to seeing him at such a late hour, but she doesn't hear him and pulls him toward her house. Secretly, his heart feels elated, as if he is on a date with her. He is awestruck to discover that she lives in a glamorous skyscraper. He is further amazed when she punches in a security code to enter the building. As she invites him in, he grows jittery about entering such a suave place since he has spent all this time in a doghouse. Upon entering her glittery duplex, Yoshino's eyes are bedazzled by its luxurious and fascinating design and furnishing. She notices his mumbling from behind the mask and removes hers to encourage better understanding. He is startled to see her striking good looks even without the mask, instantly giving her a mental rating in millions. He repeats that the place has an excellent interior and appropriate facilities. On the contrary, she is extremely dissatisfied with the facilities, to his bewilderment. She directs him toward her room so he can have a look at her computer. Feeling jittery at the thought of being alone in her room late at night, he inquires about her parents so he can greet them. He feels a 10,000-volt electric shock when she reveals that she lives all alone in the house. She quickly explains that she lives away from her family. Poor Yoshino becomes breathless from anxiety on learning that the duo is all alone in the house. Hoshikawa gets concerned about his condition and skeptically invites him into her bedroom. To her relief, he accepts her invitation. He is amazed to see a simple yet elegant bedroom with a whiff of fragrance. She points at the laptop that needs to be checked, and he observes that it is the same laptop given by the school to everyone. Feeling uncomfortable, he decides to get it over with and escape. When he mentions he's going to touch it for a bit, she blushes and confesses that she needs to mentally prepare. Now he's confused, wondering why she called him in the first place, but he quickly figures she might have some sensitive content on her screen. So he advises her to touch it first, curious about her level of experience. The shy girl looks puzzled and concerned. so he gracefully steps in, getting dangerously close. She closes her eyes, braces herself, and raises her hands, but he smoothly maneuvers past her and touches the screen instead. Her eyes pop open as he displays the screen settings and enters the apartment's Wi-Fi password. He voices the instructions simultaneously so she can better understand. She screws up her face in sheer embarrassment and even expresses it aloud. He assures her that it's okay if she doesn't know the setup. Little does he know that she is abashed by her own cultured thoughts. Oblivious to her thoughts, he completes the task by opening the web browser and confirming the connection. She is amazed at his speed. He mentions that next time, the Wi-Fi will start automatically when she switches on the laptop. Nervously fumbling with his hands, he gets ready to leave when she stops him anxiously. He is thoroughly shocked when she grabs his hand and thanks him heartily. He tries to brush it off by asking for permission to leave. She reminds him that he has nowhere to go. When he declares that he's off to the park again, she clasps his hand firmly and expresses concern that he will become ill. Hesitantly, she blurts out that she lives all alone, has a spare room in her house, and that the night is getting darker. He frantically wonders if she is implying for him to stay at her place, but he can't bring himself to confirm it since he doesn't want to be a nuisance. He apologizes for overstaying, which instantly infuriates her since the doofus is trying to leave even when she's giving him secret signals to stay. Now Yoshino feels insecure as he doesn't want to mess things up with the most popular and beautiful girl in school. Still engrossed in his thoughts, she agitatedly declares that she's pathetic with all machines apart from Wi-Fi. She flatters him for being a pro at mechanics, at least better than her. She worries that online classes are starting soon and she won't be able to operate the laptop. Wildly, she grabs his hand and rubs it against her cheek, hinting at him to stay with her. Finally, he confirms whether she is okay with him staying for a while. He adds that she would be doing him a favor if she permits it. Her face lights up, her eyes sparkle at his positive response, and she gleefully allows him. He is astonished when she declares that she's overjoyed at his decision. Swiftly composing herself, she reasons that she can learn a lot about machines from him. He promises to help her as much as he can. As she smiles adorably with a flushed face, he can't believe she is the same pompous beauty from his class. Soon, they assure each other of their support. At that moment, Anaid Yoshino overlooks the lewd look in her eyes and doesn't suspect a hint of fabrication from her side. Meanwhile, Hoshikawa, known as a lousy fibber by her family, recalls how she is always caught lying through her innocent eyes. She has always been self-conscious about that, but today she jumps in glee because Yoshino didn't suspect a thing. She feels grateful and relieved that from now on, she will be living with him and regrets lying to him. It is revealed that she didn't discover him in the park by chance. Earlier, when she heard the student dormitory was shutting down, it clicked that Yoshino-kun also lived there. She wondered whether he had returned home since his well-being mattered the most to her. Then she considered the possibility that he hadn't. Rapidly switching on her laptop like an expert, since she's the class topper, it becomes clear she isn't bad with machines. She quickly deduces there's no place Yoshino could go at night except the park. That's how she finds him there. In other words, she goes out not to fish for Wi-Fi signals but for Yoshino. When she spots him, she beams the whole time, flawlessly concealing it behind her mask. Being bad with machines was just an on-the-spot fib because she didn't know how to lure him into her house. She recalls the time before the entrance ceremony when her phone wouldn't connect to the internet. Standing there for half an hour during spring break with no one around, fatefully, Yoshino passes by. She requests his help, and he aloofly borrows her phone for a quick check. To her amazement, he fixes the problem in seconds, explaining he just had to connect to the free Wi-Fi. That's their first meeting. She mentions her phone is new and that she just moved in. Assuming she might enroll in the same school, he offers his help anytime. It's love at first sight for Hoshikawa. After enrolling, she sees him in the classroom, living in his own world, reserved, calm, and sincere. She falls head over heels but can't confess since she's terrible at lying. She hopes he will read her feelings through eye contact. She spaces out about his gaze, touch, and responses. As her one-sided love escalates, her emotions grow wilder, and today she successfully lures him into her apartment. She plans to poke more fun at him to catch his precious reactions. With a deadly desire to get closer, she decides to keep tricking him to rely on him more. Earlier, when he almost touched her, her heart jumped out of her chest. Just thinking of that moment, she feels ruffled. Composing herself, she resolves to overcome the grinding challenge of getting closer to him. With limited time until the state of emergency is lifted, she aims to spend as much time as possible together in confinement. Determined to create situations where Yoshino has no choice but to accept her advances, she plans to stay subtle, avoiding being too assertive. Blaming everything on Yoshino for luring her, she decides to push him to make the first move, keeping her lies and impulses camouflaged. Suddenly, she gets a devilish idea that makes her flush like roses. She wonders if she could sneak into Yoshino's bed, but it's still risky since he's already freaking out at the idea of living together. Yoshino fidgets uncomfortably in his sleep as something continuously brushes his arm. It seems like something soft and cushiony. His eyes pop open, and he is astonished to find Hoshikawa peacefully cuddled to him. He screams in alarm, abruptly awakening her. As she rubs her eyes and yawns drowsily, she looks confused about the whole ruckus. Seeing her, he agitatedly demands an explanation for her sudden presence on his bed. She calmly points out that she is in her own room. It dawns on Yoshino that, due to an emergency, he has ended up dwelling in the house of the most beautiful girl in his class, Haruka Hoshikawa. According to his knowledge, her bedroom is next door. It is revealed that, in a weary state, she mistakenly entered the wrong room. She casually apologizes and announces that she will be waiting for him at breakfast. As she leaves, he tries to recover from the aftereffects of the sudden jolt he has received. He's frantically doubting his actions from last night, then puzzled to find men's items in her bathroom among all the pink. Surely those must belong to her boyfriend, unless she's secretly running a men's grooming salon out of her home. The notion is slightly shocking for him since he always thinks of her as a prime and proper lady. But then all that glitters is not gold. He feels out of place at her home and hopes that he is not a nuisance to her. Hoshikawa is startled at his sudden presence in the kitchen since she is not done with breakfast yet. However, poor Yoshino screws up his face on seeing her beauty. He offers to help, but she refuses since she only needs to cook the meal. As she expertly cracks up the eggs in the bowl, he notices her amazing cooking skills. She reasons that since she lives alone, she has to have some knowledge of culinary skills. He is worried about her incompetence in machine usage. He is relieved that she can manage a stove and a microwave. Suddenly, her past fabrication about not being able to use machines at all flashes into her mind. She swiftly blurts out that she cannot use them, and that's why she is having trouble. He scratches his head thoughtfully and feels sorry for her since it might have been difficult for her all that time. As she feigns a smile, the situation becomes more awkward with the loud ding of the rice cooker. Seeing a baffled expression on his face, she quickly interjects that she managed to operate the rice cooker with immense dedication. A suspicious Yoshino praises her grinding effort, but she is in a mess, desperately trying to align the awkward situation with her lie. Finally, she bows, concealing the truth pasted on her face, and requests him to teach her how to operate a stove. He points at the stove's switch and starts to explain, but she interrupts, asking him to show her instead. To her dismay, he contents himself with rice topped with a raw egg, since beggars cannot be choosers. Seeing her puffed-up face, he comes closer to her to show her how to operate the stove. While doing so, their bodies brush against each other unconsciously. Both are struck by a mega thunderbolt. Yoshino flushes furiously and looks away in abashment. She points out his obvious rosiness, and he reasons that it might be the heat coming from the pot. Later, Yoshino munches on the delicious breakfast prepared by Hoshikawa, and she is delighted to see him enjoy it. He cannot believe the well-fixed meal despite her inability to use appliances. He considers himself fortunate to enjoy such a delicious meal. He expresses his gratitude to her for sheltering him, meals, and clothing. She shrugs it off casually, but he offers to pay for the brand new clothes. He cannot help asking whether those clothes belong to her boyfriend. His blunt inquiry offends her, and she denies having one ever. She claims that she buys those clothes for emergency situations. A remorseful Yoshino apologizes for his haste. She reveals that he is the first person she has ever let into her house. He instantly sinks into pits of regret for being too rash. To make up for his mistake, he offers his help in anything she wants. When she looks confused, he explains that till yesterday, he had been destined to sleep in the park, but now, thanks to her, he is living a luxurious life. For this reason, she can ask him for any favor she wants. Deep down, the cultured lady wants him to screw her badly, but then she composes herself and asks him out on a shopping date. She elaborates that later they can always cook their meals together since it is difficult doing all that alone. He instantly offers to cook for her, to her amazement. He proudly offers to whip up instant noodles or instant food, much to her amusement. She stops herself from chuckling hard and then apologizes for her inappropriate behavior. Seeing him all twitchy, she decides to give him the responsibility for cooking, as she is certain that anything made by him would be mouth-watering. He looks at her wide-eyed and then affirms with a smile, to her delight. Yoshino enjoys his stay at Hoshikawa's place so much that he has completely forgotten about the mysterious virus that has spread far and wide. The current situation has become so chaotic that either the utilities are unavailable or are being sold at soaring prices due to hoarding practices. Not only that, but supermarkets are packed with panicked buyers all rushing to stock up unnecessarily. Hoshikawa resolves to use the self-service checkout counter since it is quicker that way. Yoshino doubts whether she can use the checkout machine, so she smiles and confirms his doubts that she cannot. He teaches her how to use the barcode scanner, and while doing so, he can feel her peering gaze on his face, making him jittery. He wants her to concentrate on how the task is being performed, so he inquires whether something is on his face. The smarty pants instantly retort that she is checking whether his mask is in its place. Next, she pulls out a black credit card from her wallet and declares that she will be paying the bill. For an amateur, she quite skillfully slides her card onto the card machine, and he pretends to overlook her act. Coming out of the store, he observes that the streets and shops, once hustling and bustling with crowds and noise, are now eerily deserted. It seems as if he has been transported to some other world. She observes his bewilderment and wonders aloud whether he wants to stop by any special place. He is actually looking for a place to treat her as an act of gratitude, but everything is shut down. She reassures him that there's no need to worry. She suggests that they can have their own cafe at home. Soon, they arrive at the traffic signal where he points at the pedestrian button that has to be pressed. As usual, when she expresses her ignorance, a deadpan Yoshino tells her how to. He ponders that, although she is the top-notch student in his class, she is also human, so it is natural for her to be imperfect. In some areas, she excels, while in others, she falls short. Deep in his thoughts, they reach her residence building, and he asks her to press the elevator button. Like always, she acts dumb, so he teaches her how to do so. She coyly thanks him, and he does not find it strange until it strikes him like lightning that she is not bad at machines at all. He recalls quite clearly that when she first ushered him into her place, she herself pressed the elevator button. Then it flows into his mind, all the other displaced pieces of the puzzle and how easily he has been conned. Alarmingly, he stares into her eyes and finds an abnormal dazzle in them. He is stunned for a moment and then looks away mechanically, praising her hard work since he cannot bring himself to reveal that he has caught her lie. Still, he is dead curious about her need to lie to him. As she beams at him for being helpful, he has this sudden urge to retain that smile. He reflects on the notion of lying about not being able to use the machines. He speculates whether she wants to grope him into her house. Meanwhile, Hoshikawa instructs him to take a good rest, thinking that he might be exhausted from carrying all those heavy bags. He stares at her, trying to read her mind, since he is aware that she enjoys her responses and assumes that she does not have any malicious intentions. However, he still cannot digest that she might have strong feelings for him. He cannot blame her, since even the outside world is in a state of turmoil, so even her feelings could be off balance. Yoshino swings by his ghost town of a school to see how it's holding up. He feels somewhat relieved that Hoshikawa is not with him because, at her place, he always has bizarre thoughts about being alone with her. He strolls aimlessly, wondering about the reopening of the dorms. He is taken aback to see a notice that the school grounds are banned from entering. He missed the usual hustle and bustle of students in the past days, and even during the weekends, the school remained active with club activities. He decides to head back since he doesn't want to get in trouble with the security guard. Even after being evacuated from the dormitory and driven away from other places as well, everything feels like a dream to him. But now, gradually, things settle, and he accepts that nothing is the same as before. Upon reaching home, he is given a warm welcome by a flushed Hoshikawa. He is stunned at her sparkling gaze for a moment. She anxiously wonders whether he is exhausted. He announces that he will clean himself first, so she decides that they will make dinner together after he is done. He affirms but still feels dazed at his unusual situation. He realizes that, had he been alone, he would have succumbed to depression. Meanwhile, she ties up her apron and asks him about the food he likes so that she can prepare it accordingly. Yoshino stares at her, pondering that even though she isn't necessarily bad at machines like she poses, he can't figure out why she would lie to him. But he wants to continue living with her, since living in her lavish mansion and having 3 square meals a day is a blessing. He also ignores her lies and is positive that they might get closer to each other. He is completely aware that being in such a confined situation, proximity is unavoidable. He even has a delusion of a dewy-eyed Hoshikawa confessing her love for him. He resolves that, in order to maintain the lavish lifestyle, he has to be careful not to offend Hoshikawa in any way. Later, he finds a petite, feminine pair of undies on the floor. He picks them up and shudders at the thought that they might belong to Hoshikawa. He is distressed at the thought of her catching him red-handed, so he decides to put them back. But before he can do that, a stony-faced Hoshikawa appears from nowhere and calls him cultured. The poor lad is too shocked to defend himself. Instead, he frantically bows in front of her and apologizes desperately. She ominously questions him about fumbling with her underclothes. He weakly protests that he just picked it up unconsciously. She looks at his disheveled state thoughtfully while he is certain that he is in hot water and will be kicked out soon. All his horrific concerns come true when she menacingly calls him a cheesy person and bids him farewell. Trembling with shame, he tries to reason in a stammer when she declares that she is just playing with him. Shockingly, he lifts his face only to find her beaming mischievously. She reassures him that she's not mad at him. Actually, she apologizes for the risky item being left out in the open. Without thinking, he mentions that the risky item feels quite smooth. Realizing his mistake, he promptly faceplants and starts apologizing like there's no tomorrow. He knows that this time he crosses all his limits like a doofus and is certain to be driven out. To his surprise, she claims that she isn't mad at all. As he stares at her wide-eyed, she coyly stoops lower, revealing her huge creamy melons that he can't help but take a sneak peek at. Immediately, he screws up his eyes in a state of anguish and places his head again on the ground, apologizing wildly. She is baffled at his bizarre reaction when he confesses loudly that he sees all. Out of the blue, she realizes what he means and bashfully covers up her chest with her flimsy shrug. After an awkward pause, she assures him that she doesn't mind his sneak peek, to his astonishment. She reasons that it is okay since it is he who sees her twins. He believes that she should be more careful around him since he is a guy. Instead, he hears himself saying that from now onwards, he will be more careful and that she can use the dressing room first. With that, he bashfully dashes out without further embarrassing her by saying unnecessary things. After he leaves, she sighs agitatedly for losing her confidence in front of him and doing something offensive. It is revealed that she drops her undies on purpose but regrets it since it ends up agonizing him. She regrets overdoing her act of making him guilty. In such a disarray, Sunday arrives, but somehow Yoshino is not sure whether it will go by serenely. He feels uncomfortable with Hoshikawa's constant attempts to get closer to him, although the issue here is not social distancing. For instance, she plays dumb about her phone screen not being displayed. When he affirms, she slightly leans her cheek against his face and requests to watch him while he operates it. A flushed Yoshino can't resent her action, claiming that she will learn better that way. As she bends down, his focus is shot. She then complains about the lack of hot water, taking his hands to show how cold hers are. With a playful look, she asks if he can share his warmth. Embarrassed but willing, Yoshino lets her hold his hands, until the hot water suddenly starts flowing. She then whines about the faulty bathroom lights. He grits his teeth in embarrassment and heads forward to check the lights, but before he can do that, she cuddles closer to him with a warm smile on her face. He notes that she tries to find various ways to cling to him while pretending as if she were living in a stone age. He is deeply puzzled since he worries that her acute adhesiveness might lead him to bang her. He tries his level best to control his emotions and to exercise abstinence. In the case of the bathroom light, he assures her that the wiring is faulty and now it is fixed, although the lights are working just fine in the first place. He freaks out since things are slipping from his hand, and he has to protect both her chastity and his luxurious lifestyle. He resolves to distance himself from her as much as he can. His abstinence dismays her, and she notices that after the bathroom light incident, he always keeps a safe distance while talking to her or dashes into his room. She realizes that she has been too tacky and regrets being too rash about everything. She delves herself further into the hot water as if trying to drown her embarrassment. In a light bolt moment, she plops out of the water and realizes that she can't let the situation take its flow. The next moment, she sheepishly questions him about her misdoings. He assures her with a forced smile that everything is okay. She drops down on her fours and expresses her concern that he has been avoiding her lately. He looks away spontaneously and blurts out foolishly that he is observing social distancing. Deep down, he is trying to control himself. She makes a miserable face, declaring that she understands he doesn't want to extract anything from her while living together. He immediately interjects that he would rather catch something from her, but then regrets altogether that sudden outburst. Encouraged, she comes dangerously closer to him, stating that if it is just as close not to infect him, then she could keep sticking to him. Yoshino is in a fix since all his distancing mantras fail if she gives him such looks. Relieved by her satisfied smile, Yoshino relaxes as she sits close to him, though she struggles to focus. After all, the boy she used to secretly admire in class is now beside her. Determined not to earn his disdain, she carefully hides her feigned ignorance about machines, hoping he never catches on. Meanwhile, Yoshino learns online classes start tomorrow and wonders if he can handle it smoothly with Hoshikawa beside him. Yoshino arrived at Hoshikawa's place on Friday night, went through a rough weekend, and now it is Monday morning. He realizes that time has flown since he got there. As she yawns, his heart skips a beat since the angel looks even more attractive in a half-sleepy state. While brushing his teeth by her side, he keeps on thinking about all the prohibited things starting from her lips. When he glances at her from a specific angle, he gets a lucky peek through her creamy cleavage. Bashfully, he turns away his gaze, trying his level best not to have any cultured thoughts, but that is next to impossible. She sees him engrossed, so she guesses that he might be needing the sink to wash his face. As she makes a way for him, she suddenly trips and falls over him to his frenzy. He immediately pulls away from her in a state of shock, apologizing to her hysterically. To calm his nerves, she screams at him that everything is okay and thanks him for his support. Watching his freak show, she decides to leave him alone for some time in the washroom and leaves. His heart is pounding hard, and he raises his hands in cups as if holding something imaginary. Although it is an accident, he is relieved that she didn't create a scene. Still, he hopes that he didn't notice her intention. He slaps his face and tries to let go of that embarrassing scene. He decides to move on since from that day online classes are commencing and those follow the same schedule as regular classes. Students will be attending them in their uniforms. The teachers will be teaching in the classrooms while students will attend the classes from home. The previous day, Hoshikawa confirmed with Yoshino whether he would be comfortable taking the classes with her. However, he flatly refused, reasoning that she should be taking classes in her room as he didn't want to create any distraction for her. Also, he didn't want others to find out about the duo living together since that would create an unnecessary scandal. So currently Yoshino is taking classes alone in the dining room. Since it is the first remote class, it will be a short one. As he is trying to concentrate, the teacher frantically calls out Hoshikawa's name to solve a problem. When she doesn't respond, the teacher guesses that her connection might be cut off. Even Yoshino is curious because the teacher can see all the students, so by chance if Hoshikawa leaves the class she will be caught. The teacher exclaims understandably that since it is the first time, disruptions might occur, and also she is not worried about Hoshikawa due to her academic brilliance. Yoshino was worried about her though. Next, the teacher calls out Yoshino to solve that problem. Poor Yoshino is in fits, since until now he hasn't been called once. Suddenly, Hoshikawa appears from nowhere and whispers in his ears, and he looks at her apprehensively. The teacher is perplexed about Yoshino's condition, so he quickly makes up an excuse that a roach popped up from nowhere. The teacher anxiously inquires about his well-being, so he excuses himself for a bit and disconnects. He instantly turns towards her, and is baffled seeing her all anguished. Trembling with fear, she questions him about the creepy crawly. He explains that he lied to the teacher so that he could disconnect from the class. She lets out a sigh of relief and informs him that her computer isn't working. He is about to grasp the laptop from her hand, but she dodges it neatly and places it on the desk. Next, she signals him to bring his laptop and place it beside hers to his dismay. He obliges but anxiously glances at her reaction. To his astonishment, she smiles at him radiantly. When he switches on her laptop, it starts immediately. She explains that the screen suddenly turned black, so she was worried whether it broke. He points out to her abashment that the screen was switched off. He smiles, secretly thinking that she has finally realized her mistake. When he excuses himself to take his classes, her face turns into a puffed-up rice. He speculates that she probably wants him to join her for the online class. It dawns on him that she had set up the whole plan to bring him together with her. Soon both connect to the class, and the teacher wonders whether Yoshino got rid of that irritating thing. When he affirms, she expresses her relief to see Hoshikawa online as well. Hoshikawa apologizes to the teacher for the trouble. Seeing her deadpan face, he is confused about whether she doesn't want to sit beside him. Out of the blue, she flashes her cutest smile, which slashes his heart like an arrow. He concludes that at least she doesn't despise sitting with him. He realizes that if she remains stoic, then their secret will be safe and they will be able to take their classes in peace. However, all his theories are proved wrong when she begins her little poking and teasing game. On inquiring, she reveals that her computer is acting strange. He decides to glance at it, and she is right since the screen is blank. Taking the opportunity, she mischievously blows in his ear. The poor lad shudders as if a tornado was blown in his ear, but he is forced to remain silent due to the online class. Next, she slides her finger on his hand, and he is run over by creeps. He realizes that at this rate none of them will be able to concentrate, so he decides to pull away. But the fingers chase his hand and slide over it again. Next, his face flushes furiously as she rubs his hand affectionately. Somehow the class is dismissed, and the teacher instructs them that they should organize in the same way for the next subject. Meanwhile, a high-strung Yoshino counts that the peevish girl had teased him around 30 times. He begins to pant heavily since his heart is about to rip out of his chest any time. He is almost a nervous wreck, but at the same time feels honored. Still, he cannot figure out her actions and wonders whether she did everything to appease him. Appearing quite normal, she beams at him and lauds his effort during a class. He notices that she looks quite amused, so he freaks out whether his reactions were that hilarious at that time. She observes his anguished face and suddenly becomes conscious of her playful actions. She inquires whether he despised them. His heart skips a beat and he reveals that he was just a little taken aback, but didn't particularly hate her poking. It is then he peers at her face intently and realizes how attractive she is with her clear, flawless skin. He realizes that the gap between her real self and her appearance as the pompous top student is not justified. Now he can understand the feelings of those who are infatuated with her. He can feel people turning green with envy when they come to know that he is sitting beside her, so suddenly sitting beside her doesn't feel awkward to him anymore. She proposes to take the next day's classes together as well. Seeing a confused look on his face, she quickly explains that in this way he can easily fix a problem as soon as it emerges. Yoshino muses that it's fine as long as his face doesn't show on her camera. He blurts out his innermost feelings about whether she won't be doing anything bizarre during the class. Very innocently, she questions him about the term weird, and an abashed Yoshino looks away, indirectly pointing at the jabbing and teasing during the class. She smiles and assures him that she will behave properly. Yoshino cannot figure out the expression on her face and is unable to read her devilish mind, but he affirms to take the classes with her. She mysteriously smiles and declares that she really looks forward to it. As per Hoshikawa's strong recommendation, the duo decides to attend classes together. This way Yoshino can troubleshoot and monitor her screen status. The only rule for him is to steer clear of accidentally popping up on her screen. A terrifying thought strikes him that things will go smoothly only if she behaves herself. The teacher questions her about a problem and very confidently she responds to her, displaying herself as a calm, top-notch student. He recalls that she was like that in the classroom as well. Since now he is listening to her voice after such a long time, he finds it strangely soothing. Out of the blue, he yawns like a beast to the teacher's agony. Yoshino instantly clasps his mouth in a frenzy, since Hoshikawa's microphone caught that yawning sound. He realizes that he has become too relaxed, and now he has to be alert. Soon morning classes are over and students are told to join after lunchtime. Yoshino is dead tired since he was so much worried about Hoshikawa that he couldn't concentrate much in class. Although he was staring at the computer screen, he couldn't keep his eyes away from her captivating side pose. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot put his senses away from her. He is so lost dreaming about her that he nearly jumps out of his skin when she calls out to him. She casually asks him about lunch. He comes to know that she is talking about the online chat where the whole Class 2A has gathered for a group room lunch in a room, an application used for web meetings. It provides the facility of group video calls among large numbers of people and is very popular in online setups. Yoshino is reluctant to join since he doesn't have many friends. Also, he feels uninvited since the person who initiated the lunchroom request doesn't want to include him. The request is initiated by Hoshikawa's friend, Hisaka Natsuki, who is very obsessed with Hoshikawa. She is the girl with whom Yoshino has a competitive streak. He urges her to have fun and shouldn't include him, but she is reluctant and emphasizes that Natsuki invited both of them. She knows that he is chickening out because he hasn't spent much time with Natsuki and others. She grabs him to introduce him to everyone. Despite his reluctance, she forces him to have lunch with everyone. Without listening to his pleas, she even brings forward a bento and assures him that a portion of him has been prepared as well. A helpless Yoshino cannot refuse that token of kindness in the form of a homemade lunch presented to him with such a brilliant smile. As soon as he enters the room, Natsuki yells at him for being there. As usual, she gives him a nasty look. For some unknown reason, Natsuki seems to despise Yoshino a lot. It's then that Hoshikawa pops in with an angelic smile and clarifies that she is the one who invited him. Natsuki is surprised to see her that close to him, to which Hoshikawa responds that lately she has gotten closer to him. Natsuki stares at him queerly to his discomfort. While Hoshikawa is an angel, he compares Natsuki with Cerberus. He instantly wants to leave the room, but then the dreaded question about their relationship is asked. Yoshino immediately blurts out that Hoshikawa is his friend. However, Natsuki snaps at him that she wasn't asking him and gives him one of her ominous looks. She decides to let go since Hoshikawa also gives testimony about their friendship, but to avoid future disputes, he decides to zip up his mouth. Natsuki is quite skeptical about their friendship. Soon the virtual lunchroom rings with many messages about the recent happenings and the rapidly infectious virus that transmits even if the symptoms go undetected. However, Yoshino remains silent throughout and has this annoying feeling of being slapped in a corner of the classroom. He is relieved to have Hoshikawa's handmade bento, which is presentable as well as delicious. Also, it helps him to keep his mind off the tiring reality. However, he chokes on his words when Natsuki abruptly questions her assumption that Hoshikawa lives alone. Her irritation grows as the sudden disruption unsettles her further. She repeats her question and a nervous Hoshikawa composes herself quickly and affirms. Another question is bombed in, whether she feels alone living like that. A flushed and jittery Hoshikawa denies it immediately, but he feels her expressions look fake and non-believable. A sharp-witted Natsuki instantly catches her fib, even though Hoshikawa insists that she is living alone. However, Natsuki points out that she is lying about feeling isolated. Natsuki offers to hang out at her place, and secretly Yoshino thinks of her as an idiot for doing that. He calms his nerves down and restrains himself from getting too entangled in the conversation. He mutes himself to be on the safe side though. Just as he thought, he goes unnoticed and thankfully the meeting is off. He realizes that while everyone else feels isolated and left out, he is lucky to have Hoshikawa beside him. As he heads towards his room, she throws a bomb at him that Natsuki texted her a while ago that she wants to visit her. She wonders if he doesn't mind. His heart begins to beat wildly. But this is something Hoshikawa has to decide, so he leaves the ball in her court. But he decides to leave her house if Natsuki comes, since she will create a scandal about them living together. A perplexed Hoshikawa presses the phone against her chest, since she remembers that their relationship is to be kept secret. He is startled to see her bothered despite knowing their situation. It seems that she is dying to tell Natsuki about their relationship, but an anguished Yoshino begs her not to. She resolves to just give her a slight indication, and that's it. Fretfully, he asks if it would bother her if someone interrupted her time with Natsuki. Irritated, she assures him he's no nuisance and shouldn't worry. Grateful for her generosity, he feels a simple thank you isn't enough. He cannot bear to let Hoshikawa spoil him rotten. He decides to figure out a way to repay her as soon as possible. As she barges into her room, she has an outburst about Yoshino being too adorable and honest for repeatedly thanking her. She plops on her bed delightfully thinking about the way he spoils her. She has observed that even his persona is improving as well. She feels a fresh wave of admiration for him. However, she wants to give a slight indication to her friends about their relationship, as it will be better to tell them that they are dating rather than be caught red-handed in some embarrassing situation. Immediately, she shrugs off the notion because she knows that her reckless act will make him leave her place, so she decides to be tolerant to always remain on his side. Next, she instantly texted Natsuki not to come over, causing her to be suspicious. A month has flown by since Yoshino started living with the most beautiful girl in his class and commenced his online classes. During that time, Hoshikawa's baffling stimulations of his innermost emotions have been in full swing. Once she whispered during an ongoing class that she had accidentally dropped an eraser. As she tried to reach out for her stationery under the desk, he controlled himself to remain composed because any slip was enough to create an irreversible scandal about them taking classes together. Not only that, but her constant jabbing and teasing also continued to that day. In fact, he has observed that with time, those stirrings have gained intensity, and this has made him suspicious about her deliberate actions. He relates her actions to the possibility of her fancying him, but for reasons unknown to him, since after all, she is the most happening girl of their class while he is an uninspired loner. Still, he decides not to spoil his current lavish life by worrying unnecessarily, as the world is also heading toward uncertainty. When a message pops up on his phone that a sports festival has been canceled, it doesn't matter to him since he rarely enjoyed sports, trips, and events, but he finds himself fortunate to be able to spend his confinement days with Hoshikawa. After that fateful incident in the lunchroom with Natsuki, Yoshino regularly joined the room. However, it seems that Natsuki despises him for some reason, since whenever he tries to blend in with others, she always shuns him away. So the poor lad has no choice but to camouflage himself in the background. He drops his head on his hands worrying about Natsuki's behavior. Hoshikawa has been observing his doldrums and she wonders about his well-being. He makes up an excuse that he is not used to remote classes and feels drowsy in the afternoons. Instantly she offers him her lap pillow. He is dumbfounded by that ravishing thought. His face quivers with emotion while her face becomes a fully ripe tomato. She mentions that if he is embarrassed then he doesn't need to oblige. Yoshino ponders that if keeps on ignoring her temptations, then for how long she would keep on continuing. He whispers to her that when the interval arrives he will take a nap on the sofa. To his alarm, she proclaims that she will not let him use it if he desperately desires a lap pillow. Next he points at the bed, but the puffed tomato pouts that she won't let him use that either. Even the floor will be put under prohibition. Yoshino is left with no choice but her luscious lap. He protests that they are in the middle of the class. Hoshikawa assures him that the particular teacher always focuses on textbooks and blackboard all the time. Instantly, the balance of his utmost desire gets heavier than the fear of getting caught. Also, he notices that other students are also dozing off. Instantly, he places his head on her and can feel a certain warm warmth generating from them. A pang of discomfort hits him because he cannot control his gaze. He decides to change his position and faces upwards. But then something else comes into his view range. Hoshikawa notices his perplexity and ruffles his hair gently. She exclaims that he has a soft hair. When he expresses his fear of going bald, she offers him a head massage. True to her word, the massage is quite relaxing, and he wonders what they are doing during class time. Then he looks at her brightly lit face but is too nervous to fall asleep. He reflects upon the issue of how long they can suppress their feelings and desires and bewitch everyone. Later they get the news that they are entering the Golden Week. They can leave home for a while. However, to him, it doesn't feel like a holiday since he has been living with Hoshikawa for over 45 days. They don't have any meet-up plans and the shops are all closed, so they decide to remain indoors. Suddenly his phone begins to buzz and he wonders if his parents finally remembered him. To his alarm, it's none other than the beastly Natsuki. He covers his ears like an ostrich to ignore the call, but it keeps on buzzing annoyingly. Reluctantly, he answers her call only to be ranted about being sluggish. Next, she blasts at him, grilling him about his relationship with Hoshikawa, so he begins with being classmates, followed by friends, acquaintances, and then humans, but the grueling lady is not satisfied. So when she furiously calls him an idiot, she suddenly seems like Bloody Mary to him. Amused at her cheekiness, he questions her instead about her curiosity. She explains that Hoshikawa's invitation to him to the lunchroom freaked her out and she is worried that a weirdo like him will stick to her like quickset glue. He is hurt by her direct attack since she called him a bug on her face. She snaps at him that their faces are separated by phones. Natsuki is on him like some rookie detective, so he blurts out that previously she needed help to fix her Wi-Fi and that's how they came to know each other. He even mentions that she looked troubled at that time, which puzzles Natsuki since Hoshikawa rarely gets troubled. Yoshino recalls that Hoshikawa rarely asked for help in class, except once before the entrance ceremony. Curious, he questions how she became friends with Hoshikawa, given their contrasting personalities. Natsuki, caught off guard, stammers that Hoshikawa helped her study and made it possible for her to get into high school. She confesses that she owes a lot to her. Yoshino figures out that both the girls shared the same middle school. Natsuki seems very possessive about her friend since she claims to crush those trying to be gooey-mooey with her. Next, she questions him about Hoshikawa's address, and the latter stutters miserably, trying to cover up by stating that she lives all alone near the school. She clarifies that she wants to know her parents' address. When he shows ignorance, she hangs up the phone suddenly and sends him a link. The link leads him to the homepage of a huge hospital run by Hoshikawa's family. Her father is a doctor and chairman of the hospital. He realizes that she is far richer than he thought, living in a lavish mansion all by herself and using plastic money while shopping. But all he blurts out is that it is quite harrowing to run a hospital in such difficult times. But Natsuki had other intentions, revealing Hoshikawa's background to him since she wants him to know that an ordinary person like him is no match for the beautiful princess. He assures her that he is already aware of the difference, but cannot understand Natsuki's sheer contempt towards him. She mumbles to herself frustratingly and then shouts at him, violently warning him to stay away from her and that talking to him is driving her nuts. She bangs the phone on his face, and a worn-out Yoshino plops on the bed thinking that he can never tackle Natsuki. Later, when he goes out for a drink, Hoshikawa wonders about the yelling sounds emerging from his room. He unconsciously compares the devilish Natsuki with the angelic Hoshikawa and smiles. He reveals that he received a call from Natsuki. He convinces her that he and Natsuki are not close, and he is not even trying to be. His mind is boggled about Hoshikawa's way of thinking. She then expresses her curiosity about Natsuki calling him. He explains that she wanted to know about the kind of relationship they share. He assured her that he told her nothing but the truth. However, a dismayed Hoshikawa fidgeted as she wanted him to reveal something spicy about their relationship. Anxiously, he promises that next time he will deny the presence of any relationship between them and will pose them as complete strangers. Slightly dejected, Hoshikawa takes her leave, leaving Yoshino confused. Seeing her in blues, he wonders if he said or done anything wrong. Meanwhile, what happened was beyond Hoshikawa's expectations, since she could never believe Natsuki calling Yoshino. It is revealed that she deliberately appeared sad in front of him, which puzzled him. The whole situation is reversed in front of her since he has started making ties with other women despite her clear hint of something serious cooking between them. Possessively, she wants to be the only claimer of his affection and charm. Otherwise, if he mingles more with others, more people will notice him and fall for him. Later, she condemns herself for being conservative and selfish, yet she wants to own Yoshino-kun solely. For this reason, she has to keep nosy Parker Natsuki from finding out about Yoshino living with her. This is quite a dilemma because she is being double-minded, wanting her honey mush to be exposed and safekeeping Yoshino at the same time.